Welcome to Mineral Talks Live, the monthly live mineral webinar that brings you in-depth and in-person interviews with mineral people from around the world. Mineral Talks Live is brought to you by a joint effort among the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, the SMMP, and Blue Cap Productions. Tune in on the first Wednesday of every month and stay connected to your mineral world. Now, broadcasting live from beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii, the land of aloha, ukuleles, and shakas, this is Mineral Talks Live. Welcome everybody to the wonderful month of May. Today is Wednesday, May 3rd, and we are thrilled that you can join us. This is our 74th episode of Mineral Talks Live, the monthly mineral talk show airing the first Wednesday of every month. In this program, we sit down with people from all facets of the mineral world to learn more about what they do and who they are. Our guests include some of the best curatrix, curators, collectors, dealers, miners, researchers, artists, and media people in the mineral world. I'm your host, Brian Swoboda, and along with my two irreplaceable partners, Dr. Raquel Alonso Perez from the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, and Dr. Eloise Gaillou from the Society of Mineral Museum Professionals, also known as the SMMP. We welcome you to our show. As I mentioned before, this is our 74th episode, so if you've missed any interviews and would like to see a complete list of all our past guests with links to those interviews, please visit the URL at the bottom of the screen. Now, one of the things that makes this program unique is that not only is this a live show, so if I mess up, it's going to be recorded forever, but it's a show where you get to interact with our guests. All you have to do is participate through the chat or the Q&A features, both of which are located at the bottom of your Zoom window. The chat feature allows you to type messages to everyone watching the live show. If you have thoughts, comments, or questions about what we're discussing, this chat area is where you can post them and interact with each other while we're talking. Both Raquel and Eloise will be very active in the chat area and may even interject a question or two to us during our interview. Also, we encourage everyone watching the live show to share where you're tuning in from so that we can see what parts of the world we're reaching. As for any general questions you may have for our guests, these questions can be typed into the Q&A section, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the show. Finally, towards the end of the program, you'll see a window pop up on your screen. This is our quick fire 5 question segment to see how well all of us know our guests. So join us, play along, and let's see how many we get right today. Now, if you were to read a list of accomplishments and volunteer positions our next guest has achieved in his lifetime, you'd say to yourself, what more is there to do? Hey, just for fun, let's take a quick view of some of these, shall we? Okay. Quite extensive. Les Presmyk. Born 1952. Phoenix, Arizona. Oldest of 10 kids. Okay, that's good. High school, 1970. Okay, hang on. Bear with me. Okay. Yep. Hold on. Okay, let's see. Okay, senior year. Yep. Okay, we're almost there. Oh, here we go. Mineral Community Service. Okay, so Mr. Presmyk has been a board member from 1992 to the present for the Flag Mineral Foundation. He's also been the chairman from 1996 to 2001, and he is the current chairman since April 2021. He's also been the president of the Mineralogical Society of Arizona from 1989 to 1990. He has been considered a life member since 2013, a Hall of Fame inductee since 2014 at the Tucson Gem and Mineral Society, the TGMS, the show that we all love. He's been part of the show committee. He's been a member of the show committee from 1985 to the present, and he's been the judging and competitive exhibits chairman from 1985 to the present. He's also been the president of the TGMS from 2019 to May 2021. Life member status was conferred to him in 2022. At the Alfie Norville Museum, he's been an advisory board member from 2007, the very inception of the museum, to 2020. He's been presented He's been a presenter at the East Coast Gem and Mineral Show 2 times. This is also known as the Springfield Show in 2001 and 2017. He's done presentations at all the major mineral symposiums, including recently, he just did a presentation at the 50th Annual Rochester Symposium. He's done exhibits extensively. He has published numerous articles in Rocks and Minerals magazine, and he's actually working on finishing up one right now. He's flying out tomorrow to deliver the final files. Done many articles for the Mineralogical Record. Co-author of this great book right here, Collecting Arizona: State of Mines, Legacy of Minerals, with Tony Potacek, who we have to get this partner on the show. And Dick Graham, whose sons were on the show. Terry Wallace edited it. Terry was on the show, and this was published by Gloria Stabler in Lithography, and they've been past guests on the show as well. Okay, let's hope that stays there. Les was also awarded the Carnegie Mineralogical Award in 2017, and most recently in 2023, he is the recipient of the John S. White Mineral Legacy Awards. This is our guest today, Mr. Les Presmyk. Les, great to have you on the show. How you doing, buddy?
Great to be here, and thanks to the three of you for inviting me.
Oh, just thrilled to have you on here. We can't possibly do this program without having someone like you on the show. Without not someone like you, but exactly you.
Well, I hope I live up to your expectations over the next hour or so.
Oh, I'm sure you will. Now, Les, you've seen the show enough to know that the first thing I like to do with my guests is to have them talk about how they first got involved in mineral collecting. And I think you were about 10 years old when you started. So go ahead and tell us about those early days.
Actually, my first memory of picking up a stone was in the alleyway as I walked from our bus stop to my house. And I learned a number of years later that there was actually a commercial rock tumbling business along that in that neighborhood. And the guy apparently dumped all of his waste stones out in the back alley. But we have to fast forward another 4 or 5 years before the interest was really peaked, if you will, or started. Because that was when I happened to go over to Carl Thompson's house with my father. My father is a general contractor, and his youngest son is Wayne Thompson. And so while his father and my father, talked shop, because his father was a electrician and electrical inspector for the city, I was foisted off on poor Wayne. And so Wayne regaled me with stories of mineral collecting, because by then, he was almost 12 years old and he'd already started to build his collection. But I went home with a bag of rocks and minerals, and that's the initial start. But what really formalized my mineral collecting was the fact that a mile and a half away was the only rock and mineral, or the only 4-H club that was dedicated to rocks and minerals. Some of you may know Leslie Scoville, Jeff Scoville's wife. Her mother was the 4-H leader. And actually, in my younger days, I babysat then Leslie Watson. So our history goes way back. But this was a lady that truly defined the word mentor before we knew what mentors were.
Sure.
And so Wayne and I both participated in that 4-H club for 3 years. But the second year, as Mark used to say, she learned about the Mineralogical Society of Arizona to stay ahead of her members or her kids in her 4-H club. And then we were taken to the Mineralogical Society every other Friday. They had 2 meetings a month, Friday evenings. And again, they had a tremendous junior group, several adult leaders that were very engaged with making sure that the juniors were kept busy and entertained one of the people that signed on, Gary Sonnenberg, was one of the older members of that junior group. I haven't seen Gary in decades, but his younger sister still lives in the Phoenix area and is a longtime member of the Mineralogical Society of Arizona as well. So, growing up, both Wayne and I had these great mentors, both at the 4-H level and then at the Mineralogical Society level. And we went on field trips, both the 4-H Club and the Mineralogical Society. Mark and Cliff Watson started taking us to the Tucson show in 1964. And as the phrase says, the rest is history.
Now, that's incredible because we talk a lot about mentoring and we talk about groups, and it almost feels like there is a distinct lack of these kinds of organizations that can help encourage young people to stay in the mineral world and expose them to different things that some of us older people have access to. But I know that you are heavily involved with the Flag Foundation, and the Flag Foundation, I think they're based up there in Phoenix with you, and that foundation is doing a lot of incredible things to help support and encourage the kids. I know Chris Whitney Smith is always sending me photos of field trips that he's taken kids on. Is that part of the reason why you're so involved with the Flag?
Well, I think so. I guess it's part of my genetics or certainly part of my upbringing that I've always been involved with whatever groups that I've been surrounded by. So specifically for us, it's the gem and mineral groups. But as a retired mining engineer, I'm a 50-year member of the Society of Mining Engineers, and I've held leadership positions in those regional organizations. And my community service for the last 30 plus years the same way. I mean, I spent 12 years as an elected town councilman and vice mayor 3 times. So it's just part of my personality that I want to be involved, and I think I bring something to the table. And so, following the example of people like Mark Watson, and then at the MSA, the other adults, there are always adults that look at a 12-year-old like you're just a kid. But people like Bob Jones and Bill Pansner and Sarah Foster and others looked at Wayne and I and the other juniors as mineral collectors. I mean, yes, we were still kids, but they treated us like mineral collectors. And so, I've Bob Jones is another one that I jokingly say that I've actually known him about as long as his son Evan has, because when I first met Bob, I think Evan was about 1 year old.
Yeah, right.
And I treasure those kinds of friendships, and especially ones, I mean, Bob's probably the last one that's alive of those adults that mentored us as juniors. And so, it's one of those things that the various gem and mineral groups that I've been involved with, Sedona, Prescott, Albuquerque, Phoenix, and Tucson, the junior groups have ebbed and flowed. At one time, when I spoke before the Albuquerque Club, they had 90 junior members. 2 years later, they were down to less than 10. Prescott is the same way. When I first got involved with them a half a dozen years ago, they had 30 active members, and 2 years later, as hormones kicked in and other interests took place, their junior group dropped to less than 5. So it's just one of these things that we've all seen it with friends that we started collecting with, and their interests changed as they started high school, went through college, then started their careers and families. Some of us have maintained that interest. Others have come back to the hobby. And Chris Whitney Smith, whom you mentioned, the president of MSA, is very involved and dedicated to encouraging our junior collectors, as am I and other members of the Flag Mineral Foundation. The Flag Mineral Foundation goes back to the early 1960s and honors the memory of Arthur L. Flagg, Arizona's first state mineralogist and longtime curator at the Arizona Mineral Museum. He passed away in, I think, 1961 or 62. And then a group of his friends put together the what is now the Flag Mineral Foundation. Mark Watson was one of those early members, as was Bob Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the early 90s, when Mark Watson decided she wanted to leave the board, she called me up and said, would you like to join? Well, Mark was one of those people that I couldn't say no to.
Sure. Yeah.
And so for the first 10 years, or those first 10 years, I was very actively involved in the Flag Mineral Foundation. And once I got elected to town council for the next 10 or 12 years, I had to step aside my active role because my council work was taking a lot of my spare time.
Sure.
But yes, yeah. it's if we don't, there's a lot being said about bringing adults and later life collectors into the hobby, and I certainly agree with that. But I think the strength and the real legacy of our hobby is we've got to interest and encourage young people to not only pursue their collecting, but like myself, I became a mining engineer because of my hobby. Right. There are others that are going to become geologists and mineralogists and more importantly, just scientists of some kind, mm-hmm. To further the engineering fields and the scientific fields. And even if they just become accountants or doctors and I don't mean just, but, moving outside some of the professions that are more directly tied to the earth sciences. Anything that promotes the sciences and promotes college educations in our young people is important.
Absolutely. Now, you bring up an interesting point. You say that when the hormones kick in, a lot of the kids end up leaving the mineral collecting world. And you gave a couple of great examples of when you presented to a large group and then the next time you presented it was much smaller. For you, you started collecting early and then you went to the University of Arizona, graduated with a mining engineering degree, and then spent 11 years at the Magma Copper Company and then a 30-year career at SRP. What was it that kept you kind of in that lane, so to speak? Was there any kind of external influence, or was it just your outright passion and curiosity about minerals?
Well, so as a sophomore or junior in high school, my first thought was to become a mineralogist.
Okay.
But back in the late 60s, there just weren't that many opportunities. The science of mineralogy, as we see it today, examining and studying all these exotic minerals and metals and whatnot, those opportunities were not there. So it seemed to me like, I could become a museum curator. Well, all the museum curators at that time, again, those jobs were rather limited. Mm-hmm. Every museum I looked at, all the curators were 40 to 45, which meant, another 20 years of waiting to become a curator.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, where do minerals come from? They come from operating mines. Who runs operating mines? Well, mining engineers do. Voila. I decided to become a mining engineer. And that is a decision that I never regretted. I thoroughly enjoyed and loved my 42 plus year career as a mining engineer. And so, yeah, I've been focused on my mineral hobby, my service to the mineral community and my community at large, and my career. And I'm just one of those very fortunate people that, number one, figured out what I wanted to do early. It came to pass, and I've never looked back and regretted a day of it. And
Sure.
then, over the last 20 years, I've been involved with several mining projects where I was able to take my professional expertise back to my hobby and make several of those operations successful.
Fantastic. Can you describe real briefly what your role was as a mining engineer, both at Magma and SRP?
So when I went to work at Magma, my office, as I have jokingly described, used to be 4,000 feet underground. The Magma mine at Superior, the number 9 shaft, was 4,600 feet deep. And I spent most of my career there in the production side. I did spend several years as the senior planning engineer and designing drifts and where we were going to mine. And so it was very much production oriented. I spent 2 years at San Manuel, again, pretty much on the production side of the mine, and thoroughly enjoyed that. But, by the mid 1980s, we'd already shut down the Magma mine at Superior. The copper business, the copper market was still not very good. And I had an opportunity to come back and start living 7 days a week with my wife rather than just 2 days a week, because when I was at San Manuel, I was down there 5 days a week and just home on weekends. And my opportunity came with the Salt River Project to work in their fuels department to bring a new coal mine into production. And so they were doing a test mine in central west New Mexico. And so I was involved with overseeing that for the first 9 months of my career there. And then for the next dozen years, we were working on drilling and evaluating and designing a 43-mile railroad to haul that coal over to our generating station at St. John's. Unfortunately, in 2003, the decision was made to halt that project in favor of market-based sources out of the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. And so we shut down that project, and then I finished out my career being involved with acquiring nuclear fuel for the Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station on behalf of SRP, overseeing all of our other coal mines, because we were either operated or were partners in 6 other coal-fired generating stations in Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. And the last 5 years, I served as chairman of the board for the Trapper mine up in Craig, Colorado, which we owned 32% of. So just a lot of interesting things that not only kept my interest from a mining standpoint, a mining engineering standpoint, but allowed SRP was very good and being very supportive of their employees being involved in their community. And it's testament to their willingness to allow me to spend time being involved with the town of Gilbert and my mineral related community efforts as well.
Terrific. Now, Les, you had mentioned one of the benefits for you was being able to spend more time with your wife, Paula. And, you've been generous enough to exhibit your collection many times throughout the years. I believe you've won over or maybe 50 awards at the TGMS, including 2 Decetels and 3 Lidstrom trophies, over 25 awards at the Denver show, numerous other awards and recognitions. Now, every time you exhibit, it's not the Les Presmyk collection, it's the Les and Paula Presmick collection. And as I understand it, Paula was actually not only born in the same hospital where you were born, but you guys were born within 7 hours of each other. Tell us about how you met Paula and what part of the Les and Paula Presmick collection that she manages.
So yes, we were born in the same hospital. I was born at 7:00 in the evening on the 14th, and she was born at 2:00 in the morning on the 15th. So that first night we were on the face of the earth, she obviously kept me awake. And since she is a much lighter sleeper than I, for the last 47 years, I've been keeping her awake at night, I guess. And so we actually met in high school some 18 years later, 17 years later, as seniors at Cortez High School. As an aside, besides the high school where Wayne Thompson went, so he was 2 years ahead of us, our real claim to fame is that's the high school that Alice Cooper graduated from.
Nice.
And actually, Wayne's older brother, Lauren, was a classmate of Alice Cooper. Right. So we've been together since we were seniors in high school. We dated all through college, and then finally got married after we both graduated from the U of A in 1976. And so she has been everything that any man could ask. She's put up with my hobby. She's been almost a lifelong partner in that hobby and our business, De Natura, and managed to almost keep me on a business-like trajectory. We've been dealers on the main floor at the Tucson show for 36 or 37 years. But between Wayne Thompson and Kurt Van Scrive and I, we shared hotel rooms since the early 1970s and have been dealing minerals in some form or fashion since then. And so it's very much our collection. She controls and the thumbnail and small miniature collection. As I learned a number of years ago when she looked in a case and saw one of her specimens that I had traded off, I guarantee you for the next 50 years, I never made that mistake again without her permission.
Whoops.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, 20 years ago, I got the piece back.
Was it an anniversary gift you gave to her?
Well, she was happy to see it back, but she still remembered how it left the collection in the first place.
I think she needs to have a sweater with a picture of that specimen embroidered on it. So whenever she's a little bit miffed at you, she'll put it on. It'll send the right message.
Brian, you know better than that, but I appreciate the offer.
Oh, dynamite. Now, going back to Cortez High School, and your classmate or 2-year-old senior Wayne Thompson, not only did he give you, it sounds like, the first kind of collection, but you guys have done a lot of field trips together. And so you're not only a collector and a dealer, but you're also a field collector. Tell us a couple juicy lesson Wayne field collecting stories.
Yeah, Wayne and I have been spending a fair amount of time together recently, just reminiscing about, our 60-year friendship. And yeah, we spent a lot of time collecting together. He was the first one to take me underground at the Apache mine. That was my first underground adventure. My second underground adventure was with him at the Raleigh mine.
Okay. And
we have continued that legacy for the next 30 years. And, there are a lot of stories.
Remember, you're being recorded, so
yes, I know.
Choose wisely.
And I remember one time, probably our best single project together in the early days was what we referred to as the Empire Project. That started in early 1972. Yeah. And basically it was the exploration of the Mammoth St. Anthony mine at Tiger.
Wow. Okay.
The first couple of trips he made with Gary Fleck. And then I started going underground with him. The first night that we went underground, we had someone drop us off, and then we climbed down the Mohawk New Year shaft. Okay, that's the first 900 feet. And remember, this was in the summer. So when we got dropped off, it was 8 o'clock at night, and we had to be out by 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. So that first night, we went down 900 feet. We went across and started climbing up various manways and sets of ladders. Now, there was a 200-foot elevation difference between the collars of the Mohawk New Year and the Mammoth. So when we walked over and got into the Mammoth ground, now we were on the 1100 of the Mammoth. So we had to get back up 500 to 600 feet to try and find where the lead halite was and the diabolite and all these other things. And so that first night, we figured we climbed up and down over 3,000 feet of ladders.
Oh, boy.
Now, I'm not sure I could do 100 feet of ladders either up or down today, and Wayne's in the same situation. But back then, we were young, we were fit, and we were back a week later doing the same thing.
Yeah, I bet you hardly even felt the strain on your muscles. You were just chasing the treasures.
No. But we realized very quickly that we couldn't keep doing that kind of exploration work just in one night. So within the month, we were back now with a crew of 4 people, and we started lowering cots. We lowered Coleman stove and sleeping bags and water and food. And we spent 3 days and 2 nights underground.
Wow.
In order to really accomplish what we were trying to do. What kept us going in all of this is Wayne had befriended a gentleman by the name of Ed Madison.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, he had learned of a gentleman by the name of George Griffith. We knew of George. George was the one that was in the 50s was selling tiger specimens to Dick and George Bedeau and various other people. But his brother was a mine supervisor, Archie.
Okay.
And so Wayne started talking to Archie, and Archie was actually the driving force at the Mammoth St. Anthony mine for collecting specimens on behalf of the company.
Wow.
And so he remembered where the pockets of lead halite were, the pockets of diabolite, the powder boxes full of lead halite that were stashed just as the mine closed. And so, we had, firsthand knowledge, even though it was 20 years old, of where these things could be and should be. And that's really what drove us in all of this. And so by the time we stopped the project about 2 years later, without much success, I do have a couple of self-collected wolfenite thumbnails and a self-collected lump of galena, which I tout as the rarest tiger specimen that I own, because after all, how many other people not only have a lump of galena from the Mammoth St. Anthony, but actually personally collected the thing.
Right, self-collected.
The interesting thing about this whole project is that there were probably about a dozen people involved with it. And close friends of ours, close mineral collecting friends of ours, 15 years later, still did not know what the Empire Project was. It was, amazingly enough, a very closely guarded secret until Wayne and I started talking about it. And so those kinds of adventures, it's not quite like, summiting Mount Everest, but probably within our world, there aren't many people that have taken on a project like that and lived to tell about it.
Well, I mean, it sounds like a total black op operation, where it's like, okay, in the dead of night, but it goes beyond that because we talk about mineral collecting almost like treasure hunting, and you guys, I'm going to say, had literal maps to where the treasure is, X marks the spot, and spent time trying to track that down. That must have been such an incredible thrill.
Absolutely. I mean, we used to joke about the fact that nobody could afford to pay us to do what we were doing, but we were willing to do it for ourselves and for the possibility of finding, lead hillites or diabolites or any of the number of minerals that came from the Mammoth St. Anthony mine. And, it's just one of those things that yes, the thing that thwarted us was that the Mammoth St. Anthony mines were notorious for their heavy ground. Back 100 years ago, there was a collapse.
Oh, okay. Collapse. Yeah.
Of like 700 feet of the mine.
Wow.
And so we knew when we got close to the Mammoth Shaft, because all of a sudden the drift was in poor shape, lots of cave ground and whatnot. And that was the disconcerting part, is that because it's an underground mine and because Mother Nature, wants to collapse all these openings back, to reach some sort of equilibrium, we never got back to exactly where we needed to be. There was always something, a collapsed manway or a collapsed drift or something that stopped us.
So the treasure at the spot marked by the X might still be there.
Oh, it's absolutely still there.
Well, but that's also part of the thing of being young. You take those crazy risks because you don't have a conception of the value or the fragility of human life. But at least you had some sense that going down that is going to be a little bit too dicey for us.
Well, there are areas that at the time we thought we were just exhausted, and feeling bad and whatnot. Now we realize that it was probably the 16 or 17% oxygen atmosphere that we were in, but at the time, again, the idea was we had to keep moving. We had to keep looking for that next manway to try and take us back into the X marks the spot or the pot of the gold or pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Now, Les, you mentioned two of the pieces, the galena and the wolfenite, that you still have in your collection, and it sounds like there wasn't a huge bonanza, but you must have found some things that at one point were in your collection and then later moved out. Is that correct? Or was there really as few as it sounds?
No, it's there were a few pockets that were collected. There was a collector out of New Mexico by the name of Bob Thompson that went in and actually found a fairly nice pocket of wolfenite that they brought to the Tucson show in the mid 70s. And some number of flats of things. That was probably the single best pocket of anything that had been found. There's a large wolfenite that's been in the Arizona Mining and Mineral Museum for decades that was donated by the Mammoth St. Anthony Mining Company. And I met the last general manager, and when he described where that specimen came from, it turns out the two thumbnails that I collected underground there actually came from the exact same spot.
Okay.
And so we found areas that with 2020 hindsight, we should have stopped and dug. But again, it was always these boxes of lead hilite or the diaboliite pocket that kept us moving forward. And then by 1974, 1975, I'm getting ready to graduate from college. And Wayne Thompson had just secured the contract with Phelps Dodge to collect specimens in their Southwest U.S. properties. So as we were beginning to age and become legitimate, we had to walk away from this project.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now, you retired 6 years ago from SRP, which gives you, I guess, even more time to dedicate to the mineral world, either as a dealer under your company name. You had mentioned it before, Denatura? Denatura. Also gives you more time to do volunteer positions. What's the future of Les and Paula Presmick? What do you have planned now that you have a little bit more time on your hands?
So when I first started talking about retiring from SRP 7 or 8 years ago, of course, everybody, all my mineral friends were saying, well, does this mean that you're going to expand your mineral business and start doing more shows? And my stock answer to that was, what part of retirement don't you understand? Okay. We have thoroughly enjoyed being mineral dealers in the various shows that we participated in, and especially Denver and Tucson. But being a successful mineral dealer today is very different than it was when we first started in the business, both in terms of what the displays need to look like, the cases that you need to bring, and the ongoing quest for fine minerals.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've actually been winding down the mineral side of the business, and I expect that to be pretty much gone by the end of this year.
Wow.
That doesn't mean that we're going to walk away from the shows.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that if the right specimen comes by, or the right group of specimens, or a small collection, that I'm not walking away from the business, and I'm certainly not walking away from the hobby. But, it provides us an opportunity to go back as collectors and visitors at these shows, rather than having to worry about setting up and acquiring inventory and all the things that accompany being a mineral dealer. For the first time in 30 plus years, that's what I did at the Denver show this past September, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Walked around with a very good friend of mine, Frank Imbriaco. We had a great 3 days together. And of course, everybody was asking me, well, where are you going to set up? Well, it'll be February in Tucson. But the one thing that we're going to, and the change in our business model, is that, number one, we've been doing geodes for a number of years, and they're a great deal of fun. And we will continue doing geodes. That part of the booth is very simple and very easy to set up and operate. At the same
I'm
time,
going to speculate that you love doing that more because you love watching the expression on the kid's face when they crack it open, and they're the first ones in history to see these crystals that are formed.
That's exactly right. I mean, these things, the ones that we have, are out of Chihuahua, Mexico, and it's the first time in 35 or 40 million years that anybody's seen these things. But the definition of kids and geodes ranges from about 3 years old to about 83.
Oh yeah, I still call Terry Wallace a kid, just because the look on his face when he talks about, minerals and gold and cosmic dust, he becomes childlike.
Yeah, because everyone is different, and everyone is a surprise. I used to ask school kids what a geode was, and the best answer I got was, it's a round rock with a surprise inside.
Oh, I love it.
and that pretty much defines for me what a geode is. At the same time, we're going to start bringing young collectors in. Hannah Broadhagen, a junior exhibitor out of Tucson. We invited her to put some of her excess minerals in one of our cases, and we're going to do that again at the MSA show in June. We're also going to do the same thing at the upcoming Fine Minerals event at Ian and Diana Bruce's Fine Mineral Gallery in a week. They are providing me with 3 showcases to sell minerals. Hannah's going to have one shelf in one of those cases.
Hannah is an absolute firecracker. We've had her on the What's Hot in Tucson show for the last couple of years. This year, her brother was actually exhibiting also. He's a fossil collector, but she is someone to watch. I think she's going to become a real collector in the mineral world as she gets older. But
there's no question about that. Her parents and her three brothers are very supportive of this. Her younger brother Nathaniel actually beat her out for the highest scoring junior exhibitor this year. And I mean, he's every bit the fossil collector that she is a mineral collector.
Absolutely.
So yes, it's been a joy and a pleasure to help bring especially her along, and I assume that Nathaniel will be following in her footsteps on the fossil side, and we'll certainly be encouraging that however we can. So
here's a photo of Hannah doing some field collecting recently at a dig.
Yeah,
just great, passionate young woman. So good for you.
She just turned 14.
Yeah, and for those of you wondering, on May 12th, 13th, and 14th at the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery, there is going to be an open weekend. So if you're in the Tucson or Phoenix area, make sure you come on down. Les is going to be giving a presentation on Saturday and Sunday, I believe. And as he mentioned, there's going to be 3 display cabinets where he's going to be exhibiting 2 cabinets full of pieces from the Les and Paula Presmick collection. And now we've learned one from Hannah's collection.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I think I'm speaking on Friday and Saturday, Brian. I need to look at that schedule.
Yeah. Good deal. Fantastic. So, Les, how many pieces are in the collection?
Something in excess of 6,000.
6,000. And it's primarily Arizona, but you have some worldwide? How does it break down?
Well, so it's predominantly Arizona. There's probably 5,000 Arizona specimens in the collection. Of course, Paula's thumbnail and small miniature collection is worldwide in scope.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, there's a lot of Arizona things there. 20 plus years ago, I decided I was going to put together a small group of sphalerites, of all things, to put on display at the Tucson show to show people that it didn't take and does not take huge sums of money to put together a nice collection of minerals. Now, you know, they're not going to be beautiful as tourmalines and golds and aquas and wolfenites and azurites, but, you know, nice crystallized sphalerites can still be had pretty reasonably. That has morphed into a collection of over 730 worldwide sphalerites.
No kidding.
And so of the 6,000, about 700 plus are sphalerites. Paula's thumbnail collection is another 700 or 800. And so of the remaining 4,000 or 4,500 specimens, probably half of those are displayable, and the other half is what I would consider a reference collection.
Okay. All right. Well, Les, we're going to take a look at some of the pieces from your collection, but before we do that, I'm going to ask either Raquel or Eloise to go ahead and launch the poll. Les, when this pops up on your screen, you can go ahead and close it. Actually, you're not supposed to read the question, so go ahead and close that. And for the viewers at home, take your best guess on those 5 questions. These are the quick fire 5. We'll get to this after we look at some pieces from the Les and Paula Presmick collection. Les, this guy is up first. This is an azurite from the Czar Mine in Bisbee. Tell us about this beauty.
So this was part of a 30-inch long plate that was in the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum collection. And I went down one time with 4 very nice Arizona cabinet specimens to try and trade the plate out of the Desert Museum. It was too large. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't display it. It was just sitting in a cabinet in the vault. And the curator was reluctant until I said, okay, I'll trade you these four for half the plate. And I said, this is where I'm going to trim it. This is what I want from it. And a minute later, the deal was done. Now, it took me 2 months to do the trimming, but this is the piece that resulted from it that I put into the collection.
Fantastic. I love this. Now, we were talking about, you're telling us the story of the Mammoth St. Anthony mine at Tiger. So let's go ahead and take a look at this cerussite from there.
So this piece is about 5 centimeters tall. I paid $50 for it in 1966. I was in either the 7th or 8th grade when I answered a newspaper ad for a mineral collection that was for sale by a gentleman that became a longtime friend, Bob Dreyer. And I mean, 1966, this was a year's budget, but it's a piece that has become one of our signature pieces. It's half the logo for De Natura. And just recently, Tony Podacek, a longtime friend of mine and superb mineral collector, has described this as the finest Tiger cerussite miniature that he's ever seen.
That it's a superb looking piece. I love that. Let's go back to the Czar mine, the location of that azurite that we first saw. And I believe this is a copper from the Czar mine. Is that right?
Yes. So the Czar mine operated from 1890 to 1910 or so, and then was further mined by lessors for another 20 or 30 years. And the Czar is probably one of the most prolific specimen producers of all the mines in Bisbee. Very famous for its azurites, like the early one that came out of a pocket that was extended for about 40 feet in 1894, I believe. And of course, it's great azurite roses. And the reason that the roses are so lustrous and well formed is that they occur in seams of clay. This copper is the same way. That's natural patina. It's never been cleaned. The sharpness of the crystals are also due to the fact that these coppers formed in those same kinds of clay seams and were protected from what we see in a lot of the other copper locations in Bisbee, where the copper is oxidized or coated with malachite or various other minerals that reduce its luster and sharpness.
Now, Les, this copper in the photograph, it appears to be more kind of on the golden side of the color wheel versus the kind of brownish color that we're used to seeing copper. Is that typical of coppers from Bisbee?
No, it is not. Although some of the coppers will show a slight golden color. Mm-hmm. Because of molecular thickness gold. In this particular specimen, it's not due to gold. It's just the color of the copper. And the golden color is probably a little bit skewed. It's actually a golden brown, if you will.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, that's definitely one that has to be seen in person, as is this one. We're going to stick with the copper theme, which is an absolutely fantastic piece. I know that Dick Graham was a huge fan of this. Tell us about this guy.
Yeah, it's one that came out of a longtime collection in Bisbee, the Bob Kumar collection, that when it disappeared for several years and finally resurfaced, just about 3 miles from Wayne Thompson's home in Phoenix. And when everything was said and done, a partnership of Tony Podacek, Neil Prent, and myself were able to buy the collection. But this is the piece that Wayne and Mike New retained as their finder's fee.
Wow.
Dick Graham has on more than one occasion described it as the best single copper specimen he knew of from Bisbee, and it's been featured. It was a featured specimen on the for our last time at the Springfield show. It's been on the Centennial poster for TGMS. And, fortunately, I was able to acquire it the first stage in buying Mike New's half out, and then a couple of years later buying Wayne's half out. And,
superb. Congratulations.
It's now on display at the University of Arizona Alfie Norville Gem and Mineral Museum on loan.
Great. So that was from the Campbell mine, and the previous copper was the Czar mine. These are both in Bisbee, and so I think there's a little bit of, I would say, lack of clarity, because a lot of people just say Bisbee and they just assume it's one mine, but there are numerous mines. This next copper, again, is from the Dallas mine, also in Bisbee. So tell us about the copper and tell us about how far these mines are from each other.
So this is from the Dallas mine. This is very classic Dallas mine, these elongated crystalline groups. This specimen is 6 or 7 inches left to right, and the left side has a reddish cast to it, and those are actually a thin coating of cuprite. Oh. And so the mines in Bisbee are all within a mile of one another. So you've got the early mines were the Czar and the Holbrook, the Southwest, the Sacramento, the Higgins. Those are all on the western side of the district. And again, they were clustered within less than a half a mile of one another. Then you've got the Lavender Pit. And then on the south side of the Lavender Pit and underneath the Lavender Pit are the deep mines of the Cole, the Campbell, the Dallas, and the Junction. And those produced the last 45 years of ore for the Bisbee mines. But so the deep mines, all those shafts are easily within a half a mile of one another. The older, less deep mines were in a similar cluster and fairly close to one another.
Very cool. Well, I think we should stick with our native metals. And
just before you move on to the next slide, can you just tell us the approximate size of each sample?
Yeah, so this one's at least 6 inches left to right.
And in centimeters? No, I'm just kidding. Don't worry.
What's that?
17.
17 centimeters.
Thank you.
I didn't do that calculation in my head. It's in my notes.
I forget that we have some people that are not metric challenged on this, and so I'll use both. The copper before that, the fine cluster of Spinel twins, that's about 12 centimeters left to right. So those twins are in excess of 7 centimeters, the longest ones.
12 and a half.
Okay, 12 and a half centimeters left to right.
And then we'll go back to this one. This is 9.3 centimeters tall. Okay, so staying with native metals, this is both beautiful and a bit unusual. Tell us about this one. So Arizona's early mining, of course, was gold and silver, but it's been so long ago that virtually all of the gold specimens, the gold nuggets, were sent to probably the Denver Mint and smelted down and turned into coinage. I mean, in 1855, there were 22-ounce nuggets found in the southwestern part of Arizona, but none of those exist today. This particular specimen came from 50 miles south of Quartzsite. So between Quartzsite and Yuma, the specimen is about 2.8 centimeters tall. And so those gold crystals are approaching 5 and 6 millimeters. And all of the more recent gold specimens from Arizona are being found as a result of metal detecting. And there have been some significant gold
finds in the last 20 or 30 years. Most of them are nuggets, but occasionally there's a specimen like this that was encased in some sort of rock that once it was etched out, the rock protected the crystals. And so we have a specimen like this.
Super. Now, Les, you were working many years at the magma mine in Superior, Arizona. So let's take a look at a barite from that mine.
Yeah, so the magma mine at Superior is certainly Arizona's finest barite locality. And up until the Mico mine up in Nevada was probably certainly one of the West's finest localities for fine barites. This one came out in probably about 1958 out of a series of stopes in what we referred to as the A-bed replacement ore zone. Unfortunately, by 1960 or 61, this area caught fire and had to be sealed off from the rest of the mine. But during that period of 2 or 3 years, there were a number of fine barites like this one, pyrite crystals that back in the day rivaled some of the early things out of Peru 20 years later. Some very fine calcite crystals, but the barites are the real trademark species for the magma mine. This specimen is, again, 9 or 10 centimeters left to right.
I'm going to guess 9.1 centimeters tall. Just random guess there.
Yeah.
Let's stick with the magma mine. And this, let's see, here we go. Check out this calcite. That is absolutely superb. Tell us about this.
So even without my glasses, somebody asked about the photos. All the mineral photos were done by Jeff Scoville. And kudos to him. He's very gracious and very giving with all of his photographic work. And he and I have been friends for 40 plus years. I knew him before he was known as a mineral photographer. So this particular specimen, what's that?
Back when he was doing furniture.
Yes, and actually the cabinets behind me were his last.
No, oh my God, that's incredible. Let's cut back to Les's camera for a second.
Yeah, so the cabinets off to your right, my left. Those were built by Jeff.
I absolutely love it. You've got so many ties. That's great. All right, let's go back to the calcite. I'm sure people are drooling, wanting to know more.
So 1977, I'm a supervisor, development supervisor. We're driving drifts out to get to the next levels of our ore body. And I came in at 4:00 in the afternoon, and this pocket was hit at 8:00 in the morning. There were crystals up to 4 inches across. They're all twinned. The larger ones weren't quite as clear as you see here. This specimen is 12 centimeters left to right. So the main crystal is well over 3 centimeters. This is one that I personally collected once I got underground.
Wow.
Our best one, which is about a 5 centimeter twin crystal, is on loan at the U of A Alfie Norville Gem and Mineral Museum as we speak. And, the miners collected this pocket in about less than 30 minutes. And most of the specimens ended up on the rock pile. Fortunately, the day shift level supervisor recognized that these things might have some value. And so he managed to throw half a dozen to 10 pieces in a burlap sack and brought those out of the mine. And I mean that literally. The specimen that we have down at the U of A museum had 2 crystals on it at one time. And his comment was, when I threw it in the bag, the other crystal broke off.
Oh, God, I hate those stories.
And so, but I was able to collect, Paula has 3 thumbnails in her collection. The piece that is in the Bill and Robbie McCarty collection, I collected. This one Tony Potuchek has a fine miniature that I collected. So I was able to collect half a dozen or eight specimens, but the best ones were collected and some of them preserved by the miners.
Superb, superb. Les, we are a little bit over our hour, so I'm only going to share a few more photos, and then we're going to go to the Quickfire 5. But this is a cool specimen from the Live Oak mine. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back to that. I don't know if we mentioned size, but that's 11.1 centimeters wide.
Yeah, I estimated 12 centimeters wide. I guess I should have copied my own script, right?
Oh, who knows, Les? I could be making numbers up. You never know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they sound close.
Close enough.
So this is another one of what I consider our signature pieces. It's about 5.5 centimeters wide. It's a piece that both Wayne Thompson and I saw for the first time about 1968 or 69. Ricardo Campos, miner at the Magma mine in his early days until he figured out that he could buy minerals and sell them, and it was much safer and cleaner than working in the underground. But he was one of the miners in that A-bed replacement, actually mining barytes and pyrites. But he acquired a batch of these pseudomorphs from the Live Oak mine. This was the only undamaged specimen, and this is the one that he put into his collection. Now, I wish I could go back and look at a number of those
Right.
because I think a lot of the damage could have been trimmed away. But, in 68, 69, we were only looking for perfect specimens. In 1972, I was working in Miami and would stop by and see Ricardo on a regular basis. And Rocky Mountain Federation show took place in Phoenix in June of 72. And right before that, Ricardo asked, we were talking about the possibility of me buying his collection. And when he sold some other Mexican minerals that he had to Tony Worth, that pretty much put the kibosh on the collection deal. But he offered me the opportunity to pick a couple of specimens and purchase those. And of course, I immediately jumped on being able to buy this one. And Wayne has held it against me, along with the Tiger Cerussite, by the way, ever since.
Right on. All right, we're going to do a couple more images here. This is a self-collected piece from the Rowley mine.
Yeah, so I mentioned much earlier in this conversation that the second mine that I ever went underground at was the Raleigh. And it was on this trip that while Wayne and the other collector, Lee Bridges, were working a wolfenite pocket, I just wandered up the stope and started poking around and pulled off a little piece of rock. And the next thing I saw was this bug. And so I asked either Lee or Wayne to come up and dig it out for me. As it turned out, it was very easy to remove because all the barite around it was decomposed and loose. But at the time, I didn't know that. And I figured that between Lee and Wayne, one of the two of them would know how to dig it out. And so this is a specimen that's been in the collection ever since.
Beautiful, beautiful. And this is 7 centimeters tall.
Thank you.
And then you're welcome. My pleasure. That's what I do here. The final piece we're going to look at is one that when I think of you, Les, I always think of you and Wayne at the Red Cloud. So I've saved Red Cloud for the very last.
Yeah. So Wayne and I spent a lot of time at the Red Cloud over the years. And then in the mid-90s, we had the opportunity, along with James Horner, to buy the mine at a sheriff's auction sale to pay off some workers' liens against the property that dated from over 10 years prior to that. And then within 6 months, we were down there open pitting the mine. This actually came out of one of the early pockets that we hit. There were only 5 or 6 specimens, and this is the largest and best one of those. a month and a half later, we hit our great pocket. It was starting on or around April Fool's Day, and that continued for about 40 feet. But when we got everything to Wayne's house, got it all prepped and ready to split, I had the number 9 pick overall, and I took a cabinet specimen. And then when the next round came around, this was my second pick out of everything. At the time, Wayne kind of looked at me and with a puzzling look on his face. But when he wrote the article with Wendell Wilson for the MR, I asked Wayne why he didn't submit this one as a possible cover photo. And he said, Les, if I submitted this one and it was put on the cover, everyone would have wanted one just like that. And I knew that we didn't have them, so that's why I didn't submit it. But it's certainly a piece that continues to capture the eye of any number of collectors.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. It's 4.3 centimeters tall, for those of you wondering. Okay, so Les, let me just go back. Actually, I lied. There's one other specimen that I want to share. You said, going back to this copper, you said that this is currently on exhibit at the Alfie Norville Museum. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. There's another piece that you donated, or rather that you loaned to the Alfie Norville Museum, and I want to know a little bit about it. This is in the mineral tools section, and I think it is listed as wrapping material, and it is on loan, so you did not give it to them. Tell us about this one here, number 9.
Well, you have to appreciate the fact that we were setting up all of these exhibits 18 to 24 months ahead of the museum being built. We were over in the basement of the Flandrau Planetarium, and there was one group working on the specimens that were going into the first hall, the Mineral Evolution Hall. That was Frank Souza and Ron Gibbs and others. And I was in my own little closet doing all the Arizona shelves. And when Bob Downs and I were talking about the layout of the Arizona Hall, he suggested that we do a case on what is it to be a rockhound. All right. So that's how the idea started. And that's why you see all the tools, the beer flat. I tell the story of why the unit of measure in the mineral hobby is approximately 11 inches wide by 16 inches long, and we've referred to it as flats. And with the traditional and historic Coors beer flat bottom and the Budweiser beer flat top. And at the time, there was supposed to be, where it says wrapping materials, I was going to put a roll of paper towels, some newspapers, and this roll of toilet paper. Well, it wasn't supposed to be on loan by, but everything else that we have in this case is loaned by some of my collecting tools and whatnot. And so once the museum opened, again, you have to take yourself back in time, that this was right after the pandemic had created all the runs on toilet paper and shortages, that for the first 6 or 12 months, this was one of the highlights of the museum tour, as people would walk by and they just, when I say highlight, it brought a smile to everybody's face, that here was this very special roll of toilet paper that wasn't donated by Les and Paula. We just loaned it to the museum.
Oh, I absolutely love it. I love it. I remember when I was touring the museum and I saw that, I think you were there with me, and I just started cracking up right in the middle of the hall.
Yeah, I wish I could take credit for the planning of that humorous exhibit, but it's just one of those happy accidents.
Absolutely. It'll live on for legend. All right, Les, we're going to go to our quick fire 5, and then we're going to do any Q&As that people have for you. So You know how this works. I've got 5 questions. Every question has 2 answers. All of your answers are correct, but we have polled the viewers to see how well they know Les Presmick. So just respond with the one answer that you resonate with most strongly, okay? Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Quick fire 5 for Les Presmick. Question number 1, favorite holiday, Christmas or Halloween? It's a tough one.
I'll go with Christmas.
Okay. All right. Question number 2. Favorite Jones, Indiana, or Bob?
Bob, without question.
Question number 3. Nature preference, blue water or red cloud?
Red cloud.
Question number 4. Favorite mineral, wolfenite or sphalerite?
Wolfenite.
And the final question, and this might be the toughest one. Your favorite Bert? Bert and Ernie or Gilbert?
Gilbert.
All right, we've got our 5 questions. Eloise, are you doing the poll answers today?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Question number 1, favorite holiday, Christmas or Halloween? Les, after a little bit of hesitation, went with Christmas. What did our viewers say?
They said Christmas. Indeed, yes.
Christmas. I thought the answer was going to be Halloween because, Les, you and Paula put on apparently a legendary Halloween decoration at your house every year. Is that right?
Well, I appreciate the segue. No, it's Halloween is legendary. Mm-hmm. Christmas is twice the interior decorations of Halloween.
Oh my God.
So the reason that you've heard about Halloween is because that's when we usually have we host our Arizona Mineral Minions meeting in October. So people have seen Halloween. Most people have not seen Christmas, and it's even more spectacular.
Ooh, that might have to be a Blue Cat Productions scoop. All right,
you're welcome anytime.
Oh, thank you, Les. Thank you. A favorite Jones, Indiana Jones or Bob Jones? Les predictably went with Bob. What did our viewers say?
Well, come on, Bob, of course.
Although we are big fans of Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford. So,
what do you feel about the next Indiana Jones movie that's about to hit the theaters?
Well, I think the best quote I've heard from Harrison Ford was that he said, "Yeah, I'm an 80-year-old man playing a 78-year-old character." He says that was a bit of a stretch.
Looking forward to it. Hopefully it's better than the last one. Yeah. Question number 3, nature preference, blue water or red cloud? Obviously, Les went with red cloud, and I don't think we fooled our viewers. What did they say?
No, indeed, you didn't fool them. Red cloud it is, indeed.
Right on.
Although Paula is a certified diver, and if she'd been asked the question, it would have been blue water.
Really?
Oh. Yeah.
We're going to have to build a list of certified scuba divers who are in the mineral world. Because the more I talk to people, the more I'm finding other people who are divers as well. So that would be interesting. We'll do like a mineral diving trip or something. I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Question number 4, favorite mineral, wolfenite or sphalerite? Without hesitation, Les went with wolfenite. What did our viewers say?
Wolfenite. So far, so good. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I guess about the last one as well.
Probably. Favorite Bert and Ernie or Gilbert? And bam, before I could even get it out of my mouth, Les went with Gilbert. I'm guessing the viewers did the same.
Yes, indeed. Gilbert. So it's 100%
that is
there.
5 out of 5. Congratulations, Mineral Talk Live viewers. That was incredible. Let's go to Q&A. Do we have any questions that Les can answer for us?
Okay, so Michael Cook has one question. Why did you leave the red cloud?
Why did we leave the red cloud?
Yes.
So but when we hit our first big pocket, and so back in 96, that truly was $1 million pocket when $1 million was a lot of money, right? Of course, today that pocket is probably worth $5 to $10 million. But I was asked by our state geologist what we were going to do. And I said, well, we'll be like the old miner that just won the lottery. And when he's handed his check, the lottery official asks the miner, well, old timer, what are you going to do? He says, well, we'll just keep mining until the money runs out. And so we pretty much did that. The next 2 seasons were not successful at all. But the reason that we left the mine was because Wayne and James Horner took the property, and James traded it to Brian Lees for a group of very fine mineral specimens. And then Brian Lees operated it for 2 or 3 years with some success. And now it's under private ownership, and people are allowed to collect there on a fee basis.
Yeah.
So there's still plenty of wolfenite there to be found. It's just a question of moving enough rock to make it happen.
Right. Okay, thank you. We have, I was scrolling back at the chat. So I had a lot of whoos and how, wow, and incredible when we're looking at the photos, and people were so quiet when you're talking. It was amazing. Usually people chat, but this time we went from people saying hi, and hello from here. And then suddenly everybody stopped and just listened. It's funny. So I don't have a lot of questions in the Q&A. I have one question for the general audience as well. So you're saying that you're a miner, and mining a mine, of course, sometimes you find beautiful things, but what was the purpose of the mine? You said you talked about copper. Did you find any other ores? It was only copper ores or anything else? And what is the ore used for in the final stage? Who buys?
So are you referring to like the magma mine?
Yes, the magma mine, for example.
Okay, so
yes.
The magma mine and the San Manuel mine were both the last underground copper mines in Arizona. Magma mine was one of the 2 or 3 richest underground mines ever in Arizona, Jerome being the richest. The underground mines at Bisbee certainly would vie for that. But the magma mine started in the 1912, 1913 timeframe, high-grade copper, but also significant gold and silver values. Generally, the gold and silver was contained within the copper mineralization. But what was interesting about the magma mine is that from a specimen standpoint, it really didn't have a lot of open cavities and voids. So there was no oxidation. There was a little bit of diaptase at the shaft, right on the surface at the number 1 shaft collar. But very quickly, the mineralization was pretty much all sulfides all the way down to the 4600 level. And at the 4600 level, we actually found native copper, of all things. But within the replacement ore bodies, crystals were relatively uncommon. Because the replacement was fairly massive and almost total, where we would find calcites and other things were usually right along the fringes where the ore was right up against the limestone. In the case of the barytes and pyrites, those A-bed replacements were the one exception, and there was a lot of vugginess to those ore bodies. But yeah, the first 11 years, actually, even before that, I was very involved in copper mining in Arizona. But I do see one question by Anna Papadopoulos asking about the malachite pseudomorph from Live Oak. That's actually a full pseudomorph. And what's interesting about it is some of the smaller ones, the quartz has completely replaced the azurite underneath it, or what I think is azurite. So you've got a little bleb of manganese, botryodomanganese, those the white platy crystals. I guess they could be at one time malachite after azurite, but certainly the main crystals are fully pseudomorph.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Well, not from the audience. I asked the question of people if they wanted to leave, but we have a lot of people still watching, so I think people are just quiet and just loved it, I guess. It's good to see. And I think that we have other divers as well, by the way, in the group.
Well, good.
Like people raising hands, like when you were talking about ocean divers. So yeah, that's happening. I guess we can have a divers meeting soon.
Yeah, as we were waiting to start this, I was watching as people were logging in, and there were a lot of friends that I could see that were logging in. So thanks everybody for spending an hour and a half of your valuable time and lives listening to what we had to talk about.
Well,
Yes,
Les,
indeed.
thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And I did find that, Les, you are correct. Your talk on Friday, May 12th is at 11 a.m. at the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery, and you're going to be talking about the Red Cloud Mine. So those of you who are in the area, anywhere in Arizona, New Mexico, whatever, get out there, check out that talk. That's going to be fantastic. Bill Shelton's also going to do a talk that same day on what causes colors and minerals. And then on Saturday, May 13th, Les, you're going to start it off by talking about the Miami Globe Mining District, followed by Mark Hayes talking about Arizona fluorite collecting at the Homestake Mine. And then there's a catered barbecue dinner that evening. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be there, so I'm not going to be filming it because May 12th is my son's birthday, and I refuse to miss my son's birthdays for anything. So less sorry about that, but I'm sure it's going to be a great presentation nonetheless.
Hey, family comes first, Brian.
Absolutely, always does. All right, so that's going to be our... Yeah, go ahead.
I have one question in the comments. I'd like to know who Rockhound is. If possible. Since he says his comment was say hi to Paula, I'd like to know who I'm saying hi from.
All right, Rockhound, if you're still with us, go ahead and fire us off an ID.
So again, I want to thank Raquel and Eloise and Brian for the opportunity to share some of this with everybody, and to me, that's what it's all about, is the sharing with friends and folks that we haven't met yet.
Absolutely. And I see that Hannah's actually online watching it. So Hannah, great to see you. All right. Well, that is going to be our show for today, May 3rd. Remember, tomorrow's May 4th. So wear your Star Wars costume or whatever thing you have that's Star Wars. Make sure you tune in next month, because we are going to have, once again, a fantastic show for Mineral Talks Live. In the meantime, everybody be well. Les, thank you again, and hugs to Paula. Mahalo.